Welcome, fellow citizens of the internet, to another thrilling episode of Electoral Shenanigans, where democracy goes to die. Today, we're diving headfirst into the wild world of Venezuela's 2024 presidential election. Grab your popcorn and your voter ID cards, because this is going to be a bumpy ride. In the red corner, weighing in with the full force of incumbency and a penchant for, shall we say, creative vote counting, we have Nicolas Maduro, and in the blue corner, armed with nothing but hope, international support, and a suspiciously large number of votes that seem to have gone missing, we have opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez. Now, you might be thinking, oh great, another election dispute in a far-off land. Why should I care? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because this isn't just any old election controversy. This is a masterclass in how to turn a simple act of democracy into a geopolitical circus that would make even the most seasoned ringmaster blush. Picture this. It's July 28th, 2024. Venezuelans across the country are lining up to cast their votes, filled with the kind of optimism that only comes from years of economic turmoil and political repression. Little do they know, they're about to become unwitting participants in a high-stakes game of who wants to be a president. As the polls close and the votes start rolling in, something strange begins to happen. The National Electoral Council's website, usually a beacon of transparency and efficiency, suddenly decides to take an impromptu vacation. Meanwhile, opposition tally sheets are showing numbers that look about as compatible with the official results as oil and water. But wait, there's more! As if by magic, Maduro is declared the winner with a suspiciously precise 51.997% of the vote. It's almost as if someone took a nice round number and then tried to make it look more authentic by adding a bunch of decimal places. Totally normal, right? Meanwhile, poor Edmundo Gonzalez is left scratching his head, wondering how he managed to lose an election that exit polls suggested he won by a landslide. It's like showing up to a party you thought you were hosting, only to find out someone else is wearing the birthday hat. Now, you might be thinking, surely the international community won't stand for this. And you'd be right. Sort of. As news of the election results spreads, the world reacts with all the unity and decisiveness of a herd of cats trying to decide on dinner. The United States, ever the champion of democracy, when it suits them, is quick to cry foul. Secretary of State Antony Blinken releases a statement that essentially translates to, "We're not mad, we're just disappointed." Meanwhile, Russia and China are practically tripping over themselves to congratulate Maduro, because nothing says legitimate election quite like the stamp of approval from other bastions of democracy. But let's get back to those numbers, shall we? The CNE's official results are a statistician's worst nightmare, or perhaps their wildest dream, depending on how much they enjoy unraveling mathematical impossibilities. Maduro's 51.19997% and Gonzalez's 44.999998% are so precise, they make pi look like a sloppy estimate. To put this in perspective, imagine flipping a coin and having it land on its edge 10,000 times in a row. Now imagine that happening while you're also winning the lottery and being struck by lightning. Twice. That's roughly the probability of these percentages occurring naturally. But wait! There's more! The Associated Press, clearly not content with letting sleeping dogs lie, decided to do a little digging of their own. They analyzed nearly 24,000 vote tally sheets using QR codes, because nothing says 21st century democracy quite like turning an election into a giant scavenger hunt. And what did they find? Well, according to their calculations, Gonzalez actually received 6.89 million votes, about 500,000 more than Maduro's supposed winning total. It's almost as if someone accidentally swapped the winner and loser labels when they were counting. Oops! Meanwhile, the CNE's website, which is usually more reliable than your average weather forecast, low bar we know, has been about as functional as a chocolate teapot since the election. It's almost as if they don't want people poking around in the data. But surely that can't be the case in such a transparent and democratic process, right? Right? As protests erupt across Venezuela, with citizens demanding answers and opposition leaders going into hiding faster than you can say electoral fraud. The international community is left scratching its collective head. The Carter Center, known for its patience with questionable elections, finally threw up its hands and declared that this election did not meet international standards of electoral integrity and cannot be considered democratic, which, in diplomatic speak, is about as close as you can get to saying, this election was fishier than a tuna factory. But let's dive deeper into those numbers, shall we? The Associated Press, not content with simply reporting the news, decided to play detective. They got their hands on nearly 24,000 images of vote tally sheets from the opposition. Now, these weren't just any old sheets. They came complete with QR codes, because nothing says "trust us" quite like a pixelated square you can scan with your phone. Using these high-tech hieroglyphics, the AP managed to decode and analyze a whopping 79% of the voting machines. And what they found would make even the most creative accountant blush. According to their calculations, Gonzalez actually received 6.89 million votes. That's almost 500,000 more than Maduro's supposed winning total. Meanwhile, Maduro's real tally? A measly 3.13 million votes. Now, I'm no math whiz, but even I can see that these numbers don't add up. It's like going to a restaurant, ordering a side salad, and being charged for a 5-course meal. Something's not quite right here, folks. But wait, there's more. The CNE's website, which is usually more reliable than your average weather forecast, low bar, we know, has been about as functional as a chocolate teapot since the election. It's almost as if they don't want people poking around in the data. But surely that can't be the case in such a transparent and democratic process, right? To put this discrepancy into perspective, imagine you're at a Little League game. The scoreboard says Team Maduro won 10-9, but when you count the tally marks on your scorecard, it shows Team Gonzalez actually won 15-6. You'd probably start questioning the umpire's eyesight, or their integrity. But here's where it gets really interesting. These tally sheets aren't just some random pieces of paper. They're official documents, signed off by representatives from both sides at each polling station. It's like having a receipt for democracy, only to find out that someone's been fiddling with the cash register. But the plot thickens faster than a telenovela on steroids. While the opposition was busy collecting tally sheets, reports started pouring in of voter suppression that would make even the most seasoned autocrat blush. Opposition representatives were being blocked from polling stations like they were trying to crash an exclusive nightclub. Sorry, your name's not on the list. But instead of a velvet rope, it was armed guards. And let's not forget the intimidation tactics. Nothing says free and fair election quite like having government supporters loitering menacingly outside polling stations, right? It's like trying to order lunch with Gordon Ramsay breathing down your neck. You might suddenly find yourself agreeing to anything just to make it stop. Meanwhile, the CNE's website was pulling a vanishing act that would make Houdini proud. Usually a bastion of electoral transparency, it decided to take an extended siesta right when people needed it most. Coincidence? Well, as they say in Venezuela, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably electoral fraud. But wait, there's more. The Carter Center, known for its patience with questionable elections, finally threw up its hands and declared that this election did not meet international standards of electoral integrity and cannot be considered democratic, which, in diplomatic speak, is about as close as you can get to saying, this election was fishier than a tuna factory on a hot summer day. Now, you might be thinking, surely, with all this evidence, someone's going to step in and set things right? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because that's where things get really interesting. The international community's response has been about as coordinated as a group of cats trying to perform synchronized swimming. The United States, ever the champion of democracy, when it suits them, was quick to cry foul. They recognized Gonzalez as the true victor faster than you can say regime change. It's almost as if they had a statement pre-written and were just waiting for the right moment to hit send. Meanwhile, Russia and China were practically tripping over themselves to congratulate Maduro, because nothing says legitimate election quite like the stamp of approval from other bastions of democracy, right? It's like getting a character reference from Darth Vader, not exactly reassuring. And let's not forget the Latin American countries caught in the middle of this geopolitical tug-of-war. Some, like Chile and Peru, are demanding transparency with all the righteous indignation of a teacher who's just caught a student cheating on a test. Others, like Cuba and Bolivia, are celebrating Maduro's victory like it's the second coming of Hugo Chavez. As protests erupt across Venezuela, with citizens demanding answers and opposition leaders going into hiding faster than you can say political asylum, one thing is becoming crystal clear. This election has turned into a geopolitical game of hot potato, with each country trying to decide whether to catch it or let it drop. The United States, ever the self-appointed referee of global democracy, has gone full Mean Girls on Maduro. They're not just rejecting his victory, they're sitting at a different lunch table and spreading rumors about his electoral process. Secretary of State Antony Blinken might as well have said, "Stop trying to make fraud happen, Nicholas. It's not going to happen." Meanwhile, Russia and China are playing the role of the supportive best friends, patting Maduro on the back and telling him he looks totally democratic, even if everyone else is saying his election results make him look like he's trying too hard. Putin's congratulatory message was so warm, you'd think Maduro had just annexed Crimea. But let's not forget the European Union, trying to play it cool like the popular kid who doesn't want to get involved in drama. They're all, "We acknowledge the peaceful voting process, but transparency is key." It's the diplomatic equivalent of, "I'm not saying you're lying, but I'm not saying I believe you either." And then there's the Latin American countries caught in this awkward family reunion where everyone's choosing sides. Chile's President Gabriel Boric is that cousin who always asks the uncomfortable questions at dinner, insisting on full transparency. Peru, on the other hand, has gone full drama queen, recalling its ambassador like it's storming out of the room after a heated argument. Colombia's taking the "can't we all just get along" approach, calling for a thorough count and independent audit. It's like they're suggesting family therapy for the entire continent. But the real MVP of this international soap opera is Argentina's president, Javier Milei. He's declared he won't acknowledge another fraudulent election, which is a bit like saying you won't acknowledge your uncle's toupee at the next family gathering. Everyone knows it's fake, but pointing it out just makes things awkward. The Carter Center, usually the calm voice of reason in these situations, has finally thrown up its hands in exasperation. Their statement that the election did not meet international standards of electoral integrity is the diplomatic equivalent of a teacher writing "see me after class" on a failing report card. As the international community continues to bicker like a dysfunctional family at Thanksgiving dinner, one can't help but wonder, what's next for Venezuela? Will the protests and unrest lead to meaningful change? Or will Maduro continue to cling to power like a barnacle on the hull of democracy? And more importantly, how many more tortured metaphors can we squeeze into this narrative? Well, buckle up because things are about to get even spicier on the streets of Caracas. While the world's leaders are busy playing political hot potato, the Venezuelan people have decided to take matters into their own hands. And by take matters into their own hands, we mean flood the streets in numbers that would make even the most seasoned flash mob organizer green with envy. From the bustling avenues of Caracas to the smallest towns in the countryside, Venezuelans are making their voices heard louder than a stadium full of vuvuzelas. Opposition supporters, armed with nothing but their convictions and an impressive array of homemade signs, are turning the country into one giant, angry street festival. But this isn't your average protest. Oh no, this is Venezuela, where even demonstrations come with a side of drama. Opposition leaders, including the barred from running Maria Corina Machado, are playing a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek with the authorities. It's like a political version of Where's Waldo, except instead of a striped shirt and glasses, they're looking for someone in a "Democracy Now" t-shirt and a healthy dose of righteous indignation. Meanwhile, the government's response has been about as subtle as a bull in a china shop. Security forces are cracking down on protesters with all the finesse of a toddler trying to catch a butterfly with a sledgehammer. Reports of arbitrary arrests are flooding in faster than you can say human rights violation, and the use of force has been, shall we say, generous. But here's where it gets really interesting. The more the government tries to squash the protests, the more determined the people seem to become. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Sure, it might work for a second, but then things just get exponentially worse. And let's not forget the creative ways Venezuelans are expressing their discontent. We're talking barricades made of everything from overturned cars to grandma's old furniture. It's like a nationwide game of the floor is lava, except the lava is political repression, and the prize is a functioning democracy. The opposition strategy seems to be nonviolent resistance, which in this case means annoying the government into submission. It's like a nationwide silent treatment. Except instead of silence, there's a lot of shouting. And instead of treatment, there's tear gas. As the protests continue to grow, there's a palpable sense of déjà vu in the air. It's reminiscent of the 2019 unrest, but with a 2024 twist. Think of it as the political equivalent of a movie remake. Same basic plot, but with fancier special effects and a cast that's 5 years more exhausted. The international community, meanwhile, is watching with all the helpfulness of a group of backseat drivers during a high-speed chase. The United States and several Latin American countries are wagging their fingers at the use of force against peaceful protesters, while the European Union is reminding everyone about the importance of democratic rights. It's like they're all competing to see who can state the most obvious without actually doing anything. But here's the real kicker. As the streets fill with tear gas and the sound of chanting protesters, there's a growing fear that this could be the beginning of something much bigger. The opposition's refusal to accept the results, combined with Maduro's "I'm rubber, you're glue" approach to criticism, has created a political stalemate that makes the Cold War look like a friendly game of chess. There are whispers of a deepening humanitarian crisis, as if Venezuela needed any more challenges. It's like the country is stuck in a game of Monopoly, where everyone's bankrupt, but Maduro keeps insisting he owns Boardwalk and Park Place. As night falls on another day of protests, the air thick with tension and the lingering scent of tear gas, one can't help but wonder, how long can this go on? Will the international community finally do more than just clutch their pearls and gasp in horror? And most importantly, will Venezuela ever see a fair election, or is democracy destined to remain as elusive as a stable bolivar? The evidence we've seen paints a picture so damning it could make a Rorschach test blush. From the mysteriously vanishing votes to the statistical improbabilities that would make even the most ardent conspiracy theorist raise an eyebrow, it's clear that something fishy is going on in the land of Bolivar. And it's not just the catch of the day at the local market. But here's the rub. Even if we all agree that this election was about as fair as a carnival game run by a con artist, what then? The international community can wag their fingers and impose sanctions until they're blue in the face. But Maduro seems about as likely to relinquish power as a toddler is to voluntarily give up their favorite toy. And let's not forget the broader implications. Venezuela's descent into electoral chaos isn't just a problem for Venezuelans. It's like a geopolitical game of Jenga. One wrong move, and the whole region could come tumbling down. The refugee crisis alone is enough to give neighboring countries nightmares, and that's before we even get into the economic ripple effects. So, what's the solution? Well, if we had that answer, we'd probably be sipping mojitos in Caracas right now, basking in the glow of our Nobel Peace Prize. But since we're not, let's consider the options. International oversight? Sure, but good luck getting Maduro to agree to that. It's like asking a magician to perform with someone constantly looking up their sleeve. Economic pressure? We've seen how well that's worked so far. Military intervention? Let's not even go there. The last thing Venezuela needs is to become the setting for Call of Duty South American standoff. Perhaps the answer lies not in grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but in the slow, steady work of rebuilding democratic institutions from the ground up. It's not sexy. It doesn't make for great headlines, but it might just be the only way forward. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour of Venezuela's electoral shenanigans, one thing is clear. The fight for democracy in Venezuela is far from over. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and right now, it feels like they're running uphill in the rain with lead weights tied to their ankles. But here's the thing about democracy. It's resilient. It's messy. It's complicated, and sometimes it seems like it's hanging on by a thread, but it has a way of persevering. So, while the situation in Venezuela might seem bleak, there's always hope. After all, if there's one thing Venezuelans have proven time and time again, it's that they're not going down without a fight. So, dear viewers, as we sign off, Remember this: democracy isn't just about elections, it's about the will of the people, the strength of institutions, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. And in that respect, perhaps Venezuela is more democratic than we give it credit for. As for Maduro, well, let's just say that history has a way of catching up with those who try to subvert the will of the people. And when it does, he might find that his grip on power is about as secure as